that was a big deal and people were investing in ESG funds, and now that seems to be on the wane a little bit. So the other thing is that like the executive suite itself, you have this wide variety of perspectives. You've got NVIDIA with 60 direct reports to the CEO, which probably shouldn't all be considered the executive team. But then you've got people that basically say it's just me and I don't want any reports. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. And I thought it'd be cool to talk about. So I'm going to give you a couple things. Basically, it's my question is, how is the modern C-suite, the whole executive board, basically? Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Business Lunch Podcast with me, Roland Frazier, and my wonderful co-host, Ryan Dice, who is basically going through some sort of drilling activity or construction, I believe, right?
Yeah, it's my favorite. Like right when we decided to start, somebody's like, you know what I want to do? I'm going to run a circular saw roundabout now.
Nice.
So that's what we're doing. Yeah. So if you
are you like under a medical clinic or something? As you know, what
clearly, yeah,
horror movie production studio.
I'm just doing it so I can sound, more manly, more masculine. I'm trying to bring in, a more masculine soundtrack.
Tool time edition of Business Lunch. I like it.
Yeah.
Speaking of tools, I was thinking about, or changes and remodels. I was thinking about something that was kind of interesting, which is how the C-suite has changed. Fortune magazine ran an article called "How the C-suite has changed over the last since 2015, over the last 10 years." I think that really, especially over the last 5 years, because we went through kind of boom time to pandemic to everything shutting down to crazy pandemic boom time to slowdown to potential recession. It's been kind of interesting, and there've been some really cool and not so cool trends. There's been DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which they had chief DEI officers for a while, and then that seems to be out of vogue now. And they had ESG, which was, I think, environmental, social, and governance. And that was a big deal and people were investing in ESG funds, and now that seems to be on the wane a little bit. So the other thing is that like the executive suite itself, you have this wide variety of perspectives. You've got NVIDIA with 60 direct reports to the CEO, which probably shouldn't all be considered the executive team. But then you've got people that basically say it's just me and I don't want any reports. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. And I thought it'd be cool to talk about. So I'm going to give you a couple things. Basically, it's my question is, how is the modern C-suite, the whole executive board, basically adapting to the complexities of this crazy roller coaster of change of businesses that we're on? And a couple of little stats, and before we get into it, said C-suites at Fortune 500 companies grew 23% on average between 2018 and 2023, from 6.7 executives to 8.2. So the boards are expanding. Skills required for established C-suite positions have increased more than 20% between that same period. And I thought that was interesting because we'll see that one of the trends is a lot of C-suite players are being asked to take on what were traditionally roles of other C-suite players, even though there's more people there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. More that like they're getting cross-trained, I guess, around other things. And then 82% of chief information security officers, which is a relatively new C-suite position, now interact directly with CEOs, which kind of shows you the importance of security. And we know lots of people now, our law firm friend Grant, their office handles multiple hostage situations, where hackers come in and take over and request Bitcoin. So that's a big deal. 80% of those chief information security officers participate in board meetings. So the first thing is, it seems like this is expanding as a result more of complexity, more than just we're getting more bureaucratic. And I wanted to kind of see if you had any thoughts, like in the people that you've talked to. You've got chief sustainability officer, that chief information security officer, chief growth officer or chief revenue officer versus like head of sales and and head of marketing and things like that, CMO, CSO. So the first thing would just be, because these are trends that are kind of now funneling down to mid-sized businesses that we tend to work with. And I wanted to see what you thought about that. Why are CEOs creating more of these direct reports? And how can we take what we're hearing from these bigger, more advanced companies and apply it to our world? So that's my big spiel. And then I have questions and thoughts, but what's your thinking on all of that?
I'm always suspect of any time roles are created for, I guess, political and social reasons. And it seems like that happens a lot. And that can be external forces, but also internal. So we've seen a lot of roles created because it was just happening. And I
DEI,
think, and I'm
ESG
not
for
even
sure.
saying that sorry, what was that?
DEI, sustainability, and ESG
Yeah.
people for sure. Yep.
And I'm not saying that there's necessarily even anything wrong with having these roles, but I think a lot of these could very well be outside consultants, and they don't necessarily need to be direct reports into the CEO. I mean, many of these should just be a function of HR, which is likely a function of maybe ops, maybe a different C-level position. And they're elevated to a C-level, role, not because they actually need to be a direct report into the CEO, but more for status, significance, more as a signal of, ooh, look, we're saying that this is really, really important.
I
And
think it's
anytime I
virtue
see
signaling.
that, yeah, it just makes me nervous. And I guess if you're a big public company, maybe you feel like it's something that you have to do. But what you said is totally true. This trickles down. And we see it trickle down to first mid-sized companies and then to even very, very small businesses. I mean, I know some companies that have under 100 employees, but yeah, they had some of these roles
Yeah.
within the company.
Yeah.
Six-figure people that were occupying some of these roles.
And
So
a
good.
tendency, I think, uh, to put these names that they see in bigger companies on positions that really shouldn't have those names on them, right?
Yeah, and so I think it's the external things to appease external forces. But I think what can be in many cases almost more dangerous, and you see it happen more often, are when roles are created at the C level or at the executive level to appease internal team members.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened with a lot of these combined roles. And so the chief growth officer, very often I've seen at a lot of companies, they have a chief growth officer or a head of growth as well as a head of marketing. And oftentimes the reason that they're doing that is because you kind of had two people that both wanted to get a promotion and the CEO didn't want to lose one of them, but they felt like it. So it's like, oh, you can both be president kind of thing. And this gets really, really, really dangerous. Same very often with the chief revenue officer. Now, I do think that there are times where it makes sense to have a unified sales and marketing direct report. I actually think, and I've gone back and forth on this, I now believe that this is not a good idea. Having tried it in a lot of different ways, I do think having separate marketing, separate sales, both reporting into the general manager, CEO, whatever it is actually really, really important as opposed to that singular, because one of them is always going to win and you need that healthy conflict. So often though, that's done to appease an individual, not because it's the right thing for the company. And so that's just what I see happening over and over and over again. These decisions aren't being made because they're the right thing for the company. They're being made to either appease outside political forces or to appease internal political forces.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are, because I do believe the roles have gotten kind of muddled, like the chief revenue officer and chief marketing officer and those kinds of positions, they seem to be the same thing. So and I haven't seen any good like description. I believe revenue would be a broader role than marketing. But it doesn't seem like you would have both of those people on the executive board. And I almost, excuse me, with the, I mean, marketing is important, but does it really belong on the executive board? Like, is the executive board, because the old school way, the way that I learned in business school 1,000 years ago was basically CEO, and then CFO handles all financial stuff. COO handles all operational stuff. Those are basically the main reports. You might have those are the direct, what they call line reports, and then there might be staff reports that would be reporting to the CEO, like legal or HR or something like that. But that was kind of it. And it seems like that span of control has grown to include a lot more people that maybe shouldn't be sitting in those meetings. And I'm kind of curious. I think about different boards that we have and sit on and things like that. Executive boards, not boards of directors, and they seem like they're kind of crowded to me lately. And it seems like that they go on forever about issues that probably shouldn't be addressed in those kinds of meetings, that they could be addressed in interdepartmental meetings, not necessarily you need the whole team, because the whole team doesn't care about how the head of sales is coordinating with the HR person, to hire more people, or the accounting person is trying to work out the budget with the chief revenue officer. That's not stuff really to me that should go on there. But I'm kind of curious as to what your experience and opinion is on that.
Yeah, I actually think that marketing and sales should be direct reports into the CEO, because they're such critical functions. I mean, if the cash register isn't ringing, then nothing is happening. And I used to believe that, okay, have a VP of marketing and a VP of sales both reporting into, and this is all at scale.